it was pretty clear right up front that it was like he understood the value of us as well, which was great because we weren't coming in being like, "Hey, you're doing us this favor, or we're going to be this liability." That partner on our very first arbitrage, like he understood it was like, "Oh, you're going to have great tenants, like you're going to take care of the property, you're going to be in good commute, like everything that was good for them and was good for us." Like he very much understood, but it was still nerve-wracking. Like you're still talking about furnishing a space when you've never furnished a space before and signing this lease when you don't. I mean, I knew we could get someone in there, but it's at the same time we had never done it before, so we were stepping into a bit of unknown. So it was, one of those times where you're like, all right, let's try this out.
Welcome to the Landlord Diaries, where we talk about midterm rentals and the opportunities behind them. We'll share landlord stories, talk about maximizing investment potential, and discuss how to live the very best landlord life. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Furnished Finder, the leader and largest online marketplace for midterm rentals. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy our content.
Today we will be discussing Arbitrage 101 with Nate and Katie Lyon. Most of you are familiar with Katie Lyon, our marketing director at Furnished Finder. Katie has spent over 10 years in the real estate and marketing industries, while Nate has an extensive background in marketing, operations, and design. Together, they make a powerhouse landlord team, merging the strategies of marketing, creative investing, and hospitality through rentals. When it comes to monthly midterm rentals, they are perfecting the out-of-state strategy with properties in Iowa, Florida, and in their home state of Colorado. Well, we're excited to have you, powerhouse couple, on the show. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, we get Katie every week. Nate, it's your first debut on the Landlord Diaries. Why don't you give us some story we should know about Katie?
Uh-oh.
Oh, wow.
Be nice.
Yeah. Well, Katie and I have been on this journey for a few years, but I think the thing that stands out to me, and as we work with primarily with her family on these rental projects, is just her aggressive nature and attitude to kind of just get going. So I think a lot of us would kind of hum and haw and overanalyze things, and at some point we just got going, and that was really the best thing for us. So together we make a lot of we say we kind of make some of our biggest life decisions the fastest because we just know when it feels right. So I think that's been helpful in our business world as well.
Definitely. And I get to work with Katie every day. So I hear and see everything you say. For those of you listening that don't see what goes on behind the scenes at Furnished Finder, Katie is quick and efficient, and she puts out so much content every day. I am impressed by her skills and can only imagine it in the arbitrage world. So without further ado, Arbitrage 101, what steps do you need to get started? So first is the why. What is arbitrage, Katie, and why does it work for midterm rentals so well?
Yeah, well, you guys are far too nice. I didn't know that being aggressive could be a compliment, but it definitely was in that instance, so I will take it and run with it. But rental arbitrage is something that we learned that actually after I started working at Furnished Finder. So rental arbitrage is when you're renting out a property that you don't actually own. So in our case, that we are partnering with owners or property managers of apartment complexes or condo buildings or anything, even single family homes, and we are renting through them with the full transparency that we are going to then furnish it and re-rent it to a monthly tenant. So it's really a way that you can get in the door and you can start seeing if midterm rentals are right for you or grow your portfolio without having to purchase all of these properties. So that's really what it is and why we started with arbitrage. I'll say our very first midterm rental was an arbitrage, and our approach was like, okay, what is the least risky way that we can test out this theory? Because you have this theory, right? You're like, okay, and for me, it was like I was working at Furnished Finder and talking to him every day about like, hey, there's these nurses renting, there's families renting, there's all these people who are renting, and it seems really stable. And we've had an interest in real estate, but purchasing real estate can be really expensive, and I had more experience on the commercial side, right, which is very expensive. And it was like, how do we test this on the smallest scale possible? So we arbitraged a studio apartment in Iowa. So it was about as cheap as you could do a trial investment, and as small as you could do it for sure. So that's kind of the why and how, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome. And we'll get to more about that first arbitrage and why Iowa and all those details. But before we get too far into the details of arbitrage, we kind of need to explain who the players are. So between, there's mainly three arbitrage players in the midterm rental space. Katie, you want to give a quick overview of who those players are?
Yeah, so it's really instead of just having a property you own and then you're renting it out to a tenant, right? In our case, a monthly tenant, you have the owner or the or the property manager as well. So we actually work with both. We work with people who own their property and they would typically rent it out to a traditional tenant. We rent it from them instead and then re-rent it out or a property manager. So in that case, it gets, a little bit more complicated, but we're never truly working with the owner of the property. They've hired a property manager or a property management company to fully operate their property. A lot of times those are, the complexes or the multi-unit properties. So it might be like a real estate group or a property management company, and they're responsible for renting it out to your typical tenant. And then we just come in instead of your typical tenant.
Awesome. So we've got the complex or property owner, we've got the arbitrage landlord, which is you guys, and then we've got the midterm rental tenant. So, why, Nate, would you say some landlords choose this model over owning property?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big two would be, yeah, as Katie mentioned, the barrier to entry is much smaller, right? So we can, it's maybe a quarter of the startup cost essentially, if you think of it that way. So we can be pretty nimble and get these up and running quickly. I think the other benefit in terms of as we look at like profitability of each property and on a yearly basis is, the rentals or sorry, the repairs and maintenance are not falling on us, right? So if a washing machine stops working, we're not out that amount of money to replace it. So that's been big as well, and it's just that emergency cost that we know is not going to fall on us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great points. Katie, any of the pros and cons to add of why someone would choose arbitrage over ownership?
Yeah, I mean, we've been able to scale really quickly using arbitrage. We're at 14 properties right now, 13 of which are midterm rentals. We have a mix of ownership and arbitrage, but the arbitrage, since the startup costs are so much lower, even if you're buying $100,000 property, right? 20% down, typically that's 20 grand you need to come up with, right? Plus furnishings and other expenses like that. So unless you're coming in with a fair amount of capital to invest with, it can be a little bit daunting even for lower price properties. With arbitrage, it really can be like you usually have to come with a security deposit and furnishings, things like that, but it's much easier to scale quickly and you'll realize the cash flow faster. A lot of times, especially if you're not trying to compensate for that down payment. And like Nate said, the low maintenance costs. Like we've had water heaters go out, we have had air conditioners go out, we've had washing machines go out, and none of that has fallen on us. Now there are like definitely some cons when you're looking at long term. We're not getting the equity, we're not getting the appreciation. Truly, it's a cash flow play. When we're done, we'll end our lease and we're not going to be able to sell the property and make the appreciation, or we're not getting to pay down a mortgage. So for us, it's a means to grow a portfolio, to test different markets, different property types, and then hopefully graduate into owning more of those. And we are at the mercy of complex changes, right? We have one property that has changed their property manager 3 or 4 times, and that's made it a little bit challenging because they do things differently. They don't always, inherit all the details of our relationship, things like that can so there are some things that are just they're out of your control. But we've found that for our goal of scaling quickly and testing stuff, it's really been beneficial.
Hmm. I'm excited to dive deeper into the logistics of, what it looks like with the property owner or the complexes in a little bit. But, for those that come from the short-term rental world, I think on their mind is, why did you choose to do midterm rental arbitrage over short-term rental arbitrage?
Yeah, I mean, a variety of reasons, but I think for first and foremost for us, it's just not really our niche as much. So we are midterm focused. We like that sweet spot. We like less turnovers. We like a little stability. We like that, especially with traveling medical professionals. They often renew, so we're looking often either 3 or 6 months at a time with one tenant. So for us as a small company, it's a little easier to manage that way. And then there's also just a lot of times there's some of these complexes will have restrictions on midterm or sorry, on short terms or certain cities will have those restrictions. So we're kind of just eliminating that aspect altogether by going with the midterm route.
Yeah, it's a much easier partnership sell when you're saying, I won't have any nightly stays, right? I'm not going to have anybody staying for the weekend. Or I'll even say, like, we're not planning to do traditional Airbnb with this. When you're talking to a potential arbitrage partner, like, that you can just almost feel their sigh of relief. Like, that's a lot of these guys' worst nightmares. Like, they are coming from the long-term world. They that makes them very uneasy. So just it's a much, much easier, yes, it's a much easier relationship, and they see the value in the community, right? Like we're saying, like, we're housing people who need this housing, and they're helping at the hospital, or they're relocating here, or they're on a job, and it's a much different conversation you get to have.
I love that about midterm rentals. It is such a great quality tenant. You have longer stays. On Furnished Finder, the average stay is around 90 days. So that's 4 tenants a year. And for myself, so it's a lot of times 1 to 2 tenants a year. So it's a great strategy. So now, before we get started into the Arbitrage 101 of, how to really build your arbitrage business, we hope to give you guys the tools to, after you listen to this episode, you feel confident and can go out and get started in arbitrage if that's your goal, and also just share what's successfully working for Nate and Katie. So let's get a quick story before we jump into that. Can you recall your first arbitrage deal and what it was like securing the partnership and welcoming your first midterm rental guests?
Do you remember that when we walked through?
Yeah, and Katie, would know more about kind of the conversations that came first, but I think it was certainly a new concept for that property manager and for us at that point. But that transparency up front was key, and as we've had more and more kind of deals with that partner, it's we've become more valuable to them and vice versa.
Yeah, it was pretty clear right up front that it was like he understood the value of us as well, which was great because we weren't coming in being like, "Hey, you're doing us this favor, or we're gonna be this liability." That partner on our very first arbitrage, like, he understood. It was like, "Oh, you're gonna have great tenants, like, you're gonna take care of the property, you're gonna be in good commute," like, everything that was good for them and was good for us, like, he very much understood, but it was still nerve-wracking. Like, you're still talking about furnishing a space when you've never furnished a space before, and signing this lease when you don't I mean, I knew we could get someone in there, but it's at the same time we had never done it before, so we were stepping into a bit of unknown. So it was, one of those times where you're like, "All right, let's try this out."
Mm-hmm. And you guys didn't have this episode to kind of walk you through it. So without further ado, let's get you started. They've already laid the groundwork. They have a couple years of experience in the arbitrage space, grown to 14, properties in their portfolio, majority in Iowa. So let's lay the groundwork of what's the first thing you need to do before you actually start calling complexes or property owners is you want want to establish your arbitrage business. So, Nate, Katie, what were some of those necessary groundwork that you had to do to get ready to make those first contacts, like setting up your company name? Did you put an LLC in place? Things like that. What was important to you guys when you were getting started?
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Furnished Finder, the ultimate platform for hassle-free midterm rentals. Whether you're a seasoned landlord or just getting started, Furnished Finder has everything you need to find your next tenant. With Furnished Finder, you can say goodbye to booking fees, markups, and commissions, and hello to direct bookings. If you're ready to experience all the benefits renting your property for 30 days or more, head over to furnishedfinder.com where you can list your property for one low annual price. We make it easy to get started.
Yeah. We haven't always done it all in order, but we've gotten it done.
I don't think any of us do.
Right? We did get an LLC in place right away. At my old job, I used to set up LLCs all the time, so that was a piece of cake for me. We did eventually get a PO box and a phone number through Google Voice, which if anybody is not using Google Voice and they don't want to give out their personal phone number, it's fantastic. It's free. It goes right to your cell phone. So it's essentially like having a different phone number, a different cell phone, but you don't have to have a different one. So we use that. But then it was just kind of important for us to let's hit the ground running and figure it out as we go.
I think the market research was obviously key. We knew we were going to try to target traveling medical professionals. So we wanted to find units that were close to hospitals that would really be in that prime spot.
And I think a lot of us start that way. That's how I found out about Furnished Finder. My father-in-law kept saying, "Hey, y'all? We need to check out this site about travel nurses." But we've expanded to so much more growth in the last couple of years since COVID. Really got that recognition with travel nurses. Great tenants. A majority of Katie and Nate's guests are travel nurses, but there's so many different traveler types. So, what are some of those other traveler types that y'all have seen over the last couple of years?
We've had a lot of variety.
Yeah, I think traveling construction industry, I guess, and all the support industries around that. That's been big.
We've had people coming for medical treatments,
Yeah,
which has been something new, I think, for us. We've seen relocating families, people
that's
um
been pretty big.
yeah, even like an individual who's coming to get their roots settled and then the rest of the family will follow. We've seen that.
We have a friend that they had I think a minor league baseball player stay
Oh yeah.
summer at their
Mhm.
unit. So um, that's a cool one. We'll claim that,
Yeah.
as
Claim it as ours.
degree of separation.
Interns, we've had lots of interns. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, the other part of the foundation that you want to lay before you start contacting those properties is how to actually calculate whether a unit is worth arbitraging. If you don't have that figured out before you partner, well, then you might be stuck in a deal that's not profitable for you. So, how did y'all figure out, which area you wanted to invest in, and what was your minimum acceptable terms to move forward with even contacting that potential partner?
Yeah. We chose the Midwest. My family is all located out there and they're a part of our business as well. So it was kind of an easy, the weight they are going to pull in our business is more being the boots on the ground. So that made sense for us to locate out there. Also, prices are a little bit more in our range. So that fit really well. Typically, when we're looking at a deal, right off the cuff, we like to see, could we charge double what we're charged? So if we're paying $2,000 of rent, can we charge $4,000 of rent? And this is before we even really get into the numbers. If we know that that's really far fetched and we're never going to be able to make that work, it's just a hard pass. If it's okay, maybe we could, maybe we couldn't, we'll get more into the numbers, as well as if we look at it and we're like, oh, we could totally double that, we'll get into the numbers. Then we'll just run and we'll add up, what do we think typical utility expenses will be? Sometimes things like water or trash or internet are included. Sometimes they're not. You've got to know that. And then you've just got to know, what are you going to be running for occupancy? What are you gonna be running for furnishings? Luckily, since we've done so many of these and so many of them are very similar, like when we go to furnish a property, we can probably guess within $300 or $400 what it's gonna cost us. That's harder to do until you've done it a few times, especially because all the properties can be very different.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. If you don't have family in a certain area or don't know someone in the area that you're looking to invest, we have our furnishfinder.com/stats page. You can also get there from the Furnish Finder homepage, going to Market Insights. So definitely recommend checking it out to see, what's the balance of demand to property supply. You'll see a breakdown of number of bedrooms, what's the pricing per bedrooms, things like that. So it's a really great tool. And some other factors to consider going into, that just that idea of is it worth it on the pricing and the profit side is what costs are you going to incur as you're getting started in your arbitrage? The nice thing that we've already said is a pro is it's very low startup costs, but there are costs. So how did you factor those in leading into starting your first arbitrage?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggie is the furniture. Absolutely. We've found pretty cost efficient ways to do that, and we've been able to kind of replicate that with other units. But obviously, like Katie mentioned, utilities are that's a factor. Internet, kind of everything you would pay for to have a livable home of your own is most likely going to be on you as arbitrage um, landlord. Some of it is included, but those are the big ones. I would say if you're starting from scratch, maybe add another 15% of just miscellaneous costs because, w- like Katie said, we have that dialed in a little better now, but initially there was a lot that came up kind of on the fly.
Yeah.
And any insight as far as from your experience of how long it takes to pay off those startup costs and start making profit on the first arbitrage or set of arbitrage properties?
Yeah, it depends. I think we found on the studios and one bedrooms, it's within about 6 months, which is
Mhm.
great. So
Nice.
within our first lease term of a year, we're getting to profitability.
Yeah, these really pay
Awesome.
off, like, if you're gonna plan on keeping them for a few years. If it's one that you're gonna do just for a year or 2, you probably won't see, I mean, you will see cash flow if you're doing it right, not as much. But even if you don't, like, you're likely gonna learn some other stuff about, like, hey, like, this market wasn't great for X, or this didn't pan out because of this. So, um, we haven't moved out of an arbitrage unit yet. They've all been great for us. We have some though that are more successful than others.
Nice. All right, we've made it to now we're making our first call. We want to look for our first arbitrage deal. How do we structure that conversation, the lease with the property owners or the complex, etc.? So, what should be in your lease when signing with the complex or property owner to protect you and your tenant?
Yeah, I this is one thing that when we were going into arbitrage, I heard a lot of different things and a lot of people said that they wanted to bring their own lease. I got a lot of pushback on that because the operators that we're working on have a very standard lease that they use. They're renting probably hundreds of properties. It's not just like a one-off thing. So they have their lease template that they really like to use. For us, it's just really important that we get in writing that we are allowed to sublet the unit. Like we have pre-approval to sublet the unit with a 30-day minimum. And that pets are okay. So typically, otherwise, everything that the landlord or the owner, I shouldn't say landlord, the owner has in their lease that we sign with them seems fair, like pretty agreeable. Because and the other part is we have to make sure that we have a really good lease with our tenants because we're still taking on that liability, right? Like we put down a damage deposit and things like that. But if there's damage to a unit, like we're still liable. So it's important for us to have two solid leases, right? One with the owner and then one with the person that we're leasing the unit to. But that's the most important thing to us is just that we have like written permission, especially if that ownership ever gets transferred or if the property manager ever gets transferred. Like we're like, hey, here it is in writing what we're doing, and it doesn't just seem like some off the cuff thing.
Yeah, I
Nice.
think well said, and I think we're going into these conversations um, trying to present a easy win-win process. And if we're upfront saying, hey, you're going to have to jump through so many hoops to make this work for us, um, then it starts not feeling worth their while. So I think that's key. We want that win-win.
I love those points. Anything else that y'all have noticed over time that the complexes, the property owners, you're saying that they oftentimes have their own leases. When you give it a quick once over or glance to sign it, you mentioned that pets was an important one that was in there, as well as being able to lease it out, to midterm rental guests. Are there any other little clauses or things that you've learned to watch for in those leases?
It's nice to know the early termination clause. Most of the properties we work with are very traditional long-term rental properties, so they don't have like an early out option. A lot of them have that you can offer to let them sublet it if you just want totally off the hook. And they just have an agreement where you're responsible for the rent until they can re-rent it and have, a new lease with a different person take over. But I think it's just always important to know like worst case, right? It's always important to know worst case. And that's like financially too. Like, and that goes back to like running the numbers, right? Like it's always nice to know, okay, is demand strong enough in this area where if I just need to release this as a long term, I can. Or if I decide that this isn't working for us for personal or professional reasons or whatever, like, and I need to get out of lease, could the owner release it and let me off of the hook? So I think that's always just something that you should just understand with any type of rental agreement is like, what if the worst thing happens? Then what?
And what we've heard, and I'd love to hear from you guys, is that it's actually the opposite in most cases. Is a lot of arbitrage owners, you want those protections in place, but you end up by the end wanting to have a 2-year agreement or a 1-year agreement and then extend. So with a couple years of being in the arbitrage business now, have you been pleased with those leases and really lean towards longer leases now? Like, what are some of those tips for negotiating with the property owner?
Yeah, we haven't really bridged that gap yet where we've had to approach for a longer lease term in exchange for a lower rent. Again, I think it gets back to what's their incentive to do that really. Obviously we can offer stability and cut backs on some vacancy for them, but we did, recently have kind of an honest conversation with one of our property managers about just what rates we need to be able to get and that we weren't. And so we were able to work something out there, which was really great. And then renew for a year. I think some of the leases too, it's important to keep in mind what happens after that term. Are you going to have to renew for another year? Does it roll over to month? Because some of them will have that in the contract as well.
Yeah, a lot of the
Nice.
owners we work with are actually not incentivized to do longer leases because they like the freedom of if the market changes, they might need to increase rent $50 or $100 or whatever that is. So that's totally fine with us. We have been able to negotiate a little bit with deposits or pet like availability, like or a pet deposit. And that's just kind of by explaining like, hey, if I take 3 properties off of your hand, can we reduce the deposit or can we bypass the pet deposit or the pet rent or something like that? That's usually seems more negotiable on our end, but I think we're also renting in areas where if we weren't renting it from them, they wouldn't have a problem renting it out, right? So there's not perhaps as much motivation for the owner.
And pay attention to the complexes in the areas that you're looking at. Are there any new builds that need to fill their units quickly, or is there potentially any complexes that have lower occupancy at that point that would benefit from someone coming in being able to occupy, 10% of their units and really bring that number up? So we have heard on the show sometimes you can negotiate in like 1 month free rent in those situations. So play around with the ideas of what's out there, what are the options. But those are all really great tips. And I know everyone's thinking, but what about that first call? How do I not get hung up on and just laughed at, when I make that first call? So what did that call look like for you, Katie and Nate? Which one of you made the first call?
I still make the calls.
That's
That's
how
like
Dave and I are. Yes, I make all
well,
the initial
yeah.
connections.
And part of the reason I feel like we've done okay with our business is because we've all found our roles,
Yes.
right? Like Nate does the operations really, really well. That's not my jam. That's where he like truly shines and is so great as far as like refining our processes and working with our cleaners and our handy people and even our tenants. Like he's really good at understanding the details. Me, not so much. So the call is a little, it's intimidating the first time you do it, but it's really important to pick up the phone and do it and not to try to do it over email or a contact form. Like you want to talk to a person. And it's just having an honest conversation, right? And being a real person and remembering that you're doing business with them. Like I think some people make that call with the approach that they're asking for a favor, like, "Can I please rent this and then rent it out?" When really it's like, you're asking to give them money, right? Like, you're asking, "Can I give you money every month for a year
Yeah.
to rent your place?"
On time.
Right, like, on time. So it's really like you're calling them asking to be one of their best tenants they'll ever have, with the stipulation that you want to also provide housing for people who are coming into the community with a really strong need. So the first thing that I always like to do is just make sure that they understand. A lot of times people are confused or they're scared because they think you're going to be hosting bachelorette parties or having people come in or come out or there's going to be damage. So the first thing is making sure they understand that this is a monthly rental and then using some examples like travel nurses, relocating families, people who have been displaced from fire or flood or academics, interns. Then you can almost like hear them start to understand. Um, I have found historically it's very quick who is interested in working with us and who is not, and that's fine. Um, but the biggest tip is, like, you just have to pick up the phone, and none of us like making phone calls anymore, but you have to do it.
I do.
You do. Kelly Bailey, you'd be on the phone all day if you could. You are like the 1%. I feel like the vast majority, even when his mom calls me, I'm like, "Send me a text, lady." Not
Not gonna happen.
gonna happen.
Yep.
She's gonna keep calling.
Yep, got to keep up with the times. That's a perfect segue to our tenant conversation. You also want to know how your tenants want to communicate. So we've got, the Furnished Finder messaging. You can pick up the phone and call them if they provide their phone number, or you can text them. So lots of options there. But setting up your lease for success with your monthly midterm rental guests, how do you protect yourself and your business, when you're renting to these tenants? And having, the arbitrage lease in place.
Yeah, I think for us, our lease documents are constantly evolving. So we probably made updates earlier this week. We probably made updates 2 or 3 weeks ago, just to better protect, better communicate, have better transparency with the tenants, have more upfront where it's what's included with your utilities, what's that cap that we have that's upfront now where it used to be a bit buried. We have our tenants initial every page of the lease, and we also frequently double check what the local laws and regulations are. We'd like to probably charge higher late fees than we're allowed to in the state of Iowa, but we want to be above the board, and we always ask our tenants if they have questions about the lease, and we can't control if they're going to read line by line, but we want to make sure it's in there. We want to make sure we have proper protections, and especially for the big stuff, if catastrophic type damage. Um, Smoking damage, things like that that would really kind of derail our business, and would go potentially above the deposit. Those are the big things to look out for and make sure you're covered.
Yeah, the lease, anytime we have something that doesn't go perfectly, which if you're gonna have any type of business, it's gonna happen. We always try to think, okay, this happened. How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Right. So, for instance, we've had a tenant whose dog was barking in an apartment building, and she was like, "I'm so sorry. My dog gets anxious." And we're like, "Okay, but your dog can't bark all day." So then we made a modification to the lease, right? And then it was like, you're agreeing that if you have a pet, they follow these behaviors or these regulations, right? So a customizable lease through Furnished Finder is essential for us. It's like absolutely essential. And like Nate said, like we're constantly just anytime even the littlest thing comes up, we're like, how can we learn from this? How can we move forward? How can we adapt to this? Same thing with like being really transparent with like cleaning fees, deposits, pet cleaning fees. We have a pet cleaning fee and a pet deposit. And then the damage protection plan is something that we add to properties, particularly if there are pets. But we don't necessarily involve the tenant in that, but that is something that we add just as a layer of protection for the properties. And that's nice for the arbitrage properties too, because you feel extra responsible for those ones, right? You're like, if something goes wrong, it's like you have to go tell mom and dad. Like you have to go tell the property owners and you don't want to, right? So it's like having that extra layer of protection is great. We had one arbitrage property where unfortunately they had some cats and their cats did some pretty fair damage to the carpet and we had to replace the carpet in the whole apartment. And luckily the property manager was very, understanding and they were like, "Oh, it happens." And they were able to give us the carpet vendor that they use. So we made sure the carpet still matched and everything. We didn't have the damage protection plan on that unit and it would have been really nice to have.
Yep, and that's available in your Furnished Finder landlord tools under your dashboard. So check it out. All the details are there. I think when you're talking about leases, it's always important, like we're saying, to be super protected if something happens. But I always like to tie it back to as well. That's why we do midterm rentals is because it's literally the best tenant type. So what you're hearing Katie and Nate say is things happen. That happens with any rental, but it doesn't, you don't quit, you don't give up. You just, you figure out how to keep going and modify your changes. And at the end of the day, it likely didn't come out of pocket because you've got the deposit in place, you've got the damage protection options. So there are great ways to make sure and protect yourself, protect the property. So let's lean into that tenant type a little more and why midterm rental guests really are one of the best tenants in the real estate industry. And Katie and I talk about this a lot. So let's hear what Nate has to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you take a little bit of the hit or miss out of the equation, especially with traveling professionals. I mean, for one thing, a lot of these traveling nurses aren't even in the unit that often. They're working, long hours. They want somewhere to get some restful sleep and a nice, safe place to stay. And we do try to put an emphasis on some of those nicer touches and appeal a bit and have it be, a little more of a premium type feel for them. So, I think in general they're just good, hardworking people that are appreciative of the great place to stay. They're appreciative of good communication. Um, we don't often hear from them a lot during their stay, which we count as a good thing. But we'll hear when they move out that, "Hey, thank you so much for having us. It was amazing." Like once they're able to kind of breathe and move on to their next thing, like we hear that good feedback and that, is great. And it just reaffirms that they're really good people and um, there for the right reasons, I guess. So
Well, we've covered a majority of the steps getting started with rental arbitrage, specifically through the midterm rental strategy. And one of those things that really helps you shine and drives up your occupancy is the way you market your property. And we happen to have the marketing director of Furnish Finder with us. So let's make sure and dive into some of those strategies. Katie, what are the average sizes of your units that y'all have engaged with arbitrage, and how are you marketing that to travel nurses and a variety of other traveler types like corporate renters, displaced families, etc.?
Yeah, we have arbitrage properties from like 550 square feet to 3,000 square feet. So we have a studio apartment all the way up to a four-bed single family home. We have more of the smaller properties just because there was a couple buildings that had multiples of them. And we just took them all. But I feel like this is where Nate and I can kind of combine and become a power couple is because he also has a really strong marketing background. So when we put our heads together, we can create some good marketing, but it's not rocket science with these, right? Like the key is quality. We always get professional pictures done. Like hands, it's never debate. It's never like, hey, but we're running tight on budget. It's every single time it's done. That is a huge key. We also like testing things, right? So like if we are marketing a property towards a displaced or relocating family, we might put that in the headline. We might say 4 bed, 4 bath property, great for relocating families, or in a great school district or near parks, like things that are good for families. Um, that's huge, and just describing ourselves has also helped a lot, like, describing that we're professional landlords, that we take this seriously, that we know what we're doing. We're gonna do things officially and in we've worked out the kinks, right? People really appreciate that when they're traveling. They wanna know that they're gonna be working with a great landlord. So that is something also that we've, taken pretty seriously, and then just being, like, thorough, right? And I think it's important when you're doing your marketing to target the tenant type that you think would be best for your property, but not exclude others, right? So you can say in your description, like, this property is great for medical professionals because it's close to the hospital facilities, or, it's located close to public transit. But you don't have to say it's bad for other people, right? You can say the other benefits as well. You can say it's great to go downtown or close to restaurants, things that make it so that you can hit on your niche without saying that everybody else is gonna feel like, "Oh, well, I'm not a nurse, I can't rent that," right? So making it feel, just high quality overall has become really important to us, and we haven't had any trouble with keeping ours full. Like, in fact, right now, like, we're having leads where
Having trouble placing them.
we can't place them, right? We have nowhere to put
Good
them,
problem to
and
have.
and then yeah, and so now we're thinking, "Okay, do we have the bandwidth to do another one? Like, should we do another one this summer?" Because we're like, we're getting more demand than we have, and we are not the cheapest option, right? But we have found that these travelers, like, they appreciate quality and they appreciate professionalism, and, at least those are the tenants that we are working with.
Yeah, I think I'll just add too on the listings. You might not get it perfect right up front, but it can be an evolving thing as well. And just pay attention to the questions you're getting from leads or from current tenants. 90% of the travel nurses, that reach out to us will ask us how far a unit is from the certain hospital that they're going to be at. So we'll add that to the listing. We'll add our or whether utilities are included. So those kind of frequently asked questions, get that in the listing because I think people do really kind of thoroughly click through those and thoroughly read the listings. They're researching it as you would if you were looking to move somewhere permanently, not maybe to that degree, but they want to know as much about where they're staying as possible before committing.
And what about the pricing for your listing? We won't do a deep dive on how to price your listing because we have episodes for that. I'll put it in the show notes. We're really building that structure of how to start an arbitrage business. But how do you adjust for that seasonal pricing? Do you see a lot of seasonal pricing or not necessarily in your market?
Yeah, I would say a little bit. In the winter, we do adjust a little bit, but it's based more on demand and um, it's not extreme. We don't have extreme seasonal pricing. Um, I think we have somewhat seen in some of our markets a cap, whether it's a bigger unit or a smaller unit. So that's, I think, something to keep in mind. At some point, there might be a kind of a cap in the market. I think recently we're not seeing quite as much pushback on pricing, especially on 2 and 3 bedroom units, because I think we're seeing a little more of traveling professionals pairing up. So they're kind of splitting that monthly rent between them, so it's not such a big deal, so we're seeing a little more and more of that.
Nice. One thing that y'all said that I've never thought about before is, just that idea of course, you want a professional listing. Hands down, you want to get high quality professional photos. That's to make sure that you're marketing your property well. But for arbitrage, it can also be a tool in presenting your opportunity to a complex. Because now, once you've got your first arbitrage, or even just getting started, you can use your Furnished Finder landlord profile as a website to show your impeccable properties and just the quality of professionalism and display that they're going to see will carry over into how you run your business as well. So, along those ideas of just making sure that your listing is on spot, the calendar is an important piece to that, because on Furnish Finder, we're matching you with, the tenant or the traveler's desired date of stay. And so it's super important that you keep your calendar up to date. And I love how in your headlines, you're helping reinforce that calendar with, which when each of your units is becoming available. And if you don't know, one wording that really stood out that I'm gonna start using if I have something in this position is available late summer 2025. Just that idea of, hey, it's likely coming available, but we don't know the exact date. So, Katie, what tips do you have for those that we often see in the midterm rental space that guests are going to extend and you don't necessarily know their exact move out date? How do you plan ahead for that to market your property well?
Yeah, we tinker with our headlines all of the time. I know that like catching a traveler's attention is more of an art than a science. So if we know that it's coming up late, but maybe we have late summer, but we have maybe someone who doesn't know their exact move out date or something like that, we will put like available late summer. We'll put our best guess in the calendar because we want our leads to be matched, with as closely as we can get. That's become a really big habit for us is like anytime we can update the calendar, we do. Like first thing, we have a booking count, like it's like lease is signed, update the calendar. Like it's those two go hand in hand and like that is like a non-negotiable with us. Um, but we do tinker with that because if it's coming up, like there's a lot of people who say, "Hey, I know I'm coming to the area. I don't know my exact dates, but I like your unit. Can I touch base with you sooner?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, of course." We'll also keep their contact information and reach out to them as the time comes closer. And they'll say, "Hey, our tenant's moving on X date. Does that work for you?" And sometimes they say, "Yeah, that works great." Sometimes they say, "Oh, that's a couple days, later than I need, but I'll stay at a hotel for a couple days because I really like your property." So there are people that are searching for last minute stays and are searching for, a week or 2 before they come or a couple days even before they come. There's also people who are the planners and they're looking 3 to 6 months out where we might not be able to commit then, but we can surely at least start that conversation, take note of them and when they're traveling and say, "Okay, when I do know when this person is moving out, I can reach out." And once, if you get to our stage where you have multiple properties, we often do the shuffle too. It'll be like, "Okay, I can commit you to somewhere. I don't know where. It will be one of these 4 units. Are you cool with that?" And we'll do that, and we'll do the shuffle to minimize vacancies and stuff, but it does. It helps you, like, build those future leads so that you can keep your occupancy really high.
That's a great segue to why it's important to have all your properties on Furnish Finder. So, one of the most common things that we hear for arbitrage hosts is, hey, my complex or property owner has recognized how much of an asset I am to them as an arbitrage partner in the midterm rental space. And they offer me, like, I get first choice on when new units come available. So then you end up stacking, multiple units in a complex, and then I'm sure expanding out past that as well. So, Katie, Nate, why have you found that it's so important to list each of those properties on Furnish Finder, not just one that roll all the information through?
Yeah, I think it's really primarily a logistical thing where we can say, "Hey, somebody just signed this lease." It happens all the time. Somebody just signed a lease, this morning on this unit, but I have this other, identical unit or nearly identical unit here, and you're not taking them off to a different platform that way. So, they can see it. They can see that, the pricing is the same and, okay, well, these really are pretty identical, and I can work with this. So, I think that's great just to keep, the communication channel kind of focused on the one platform.
Yeah.
Um,
We're trying to be professionals, right? Like and we're trying to be that professional relationship with tenants, and that doesn't start by saying, "Yeah, I have another unit. It's not listed on here, but it looks exactly the same." It needs to be, "Hey, I have another unit. It looks exactly the same as this. Here's the listing for that one," and they can take a look. Because these guys are we've never done a showing, have we? Maybe one? Like, they're coming sight unseen. They want some security. They wanna know that you're legit, that your property's legit.
yeah, we've done a couple showings. It's not something we kind of advertise, and it's really only really if there's vacancy,
Yeah.
or they can kind of self walk it themselves, and it's already cleaned and ready to go. We can't really rely on what the place is going to look like, kind of mid stay for somebody.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a great, just step by step how to start an arbitrage business. All those details, Arbitrage 101. Y'all have done a great job kind of helping anyone listening to get started on the right foot. Few things just to wrap us up. And reminder, if we didn't touch on something that you wanted to hear more about, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments or reach out to our customer service team. Like, we are here to help along your journey and are trying to be Furnished Finder is the go-to place for all steps involved with midterm rentals. So we didn't talk about furnishing. Why? Because we have a furnishing partner, Minoan. So you want to go, I'm going to put in the show notes the episode so that you can go check out, what we recommend for furnishing. We also have a furnishing checklist. So that's why we didn't cover it in this episode. But Katie, Nate, what are some lessons or changes that you've made to your arbitrage business over the years?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as specific to arbitrage, but just in general, we've refined a lot. I mentioned kind of those questions you get with leads, but we try to pay attention to the questions we get from our tenants too. And I think we've made a lot of progress on really setting the expectations on a really smooth check-in and kind of covering all those details of where to find the unit and kind of how to get in and what's going to happen next. So I think that's been huge for us. We've learned a lot with the listings and filling those out and really giving a lot of information and transparency. Um, those are biggies. I think the arbitrage, what we've really learned is which partners are really high quality and which ones, maybe leave a little more to be desired. And so, having that great partner, asking those right questions up front. We didn't touch a ton on maintenance, but really understanding how they approach maintenance and how they approach service requests and that communication channel has been key as well. But if there's no transparency up front with them, it's going to be a little rockier and feel like you're kind of sneaking around and once you have that good relationship, then it doesn't feel like that. It feels like a partnership.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are wrapping up this episode. So, Katie Lyon, I want you to, take us out with, just a recap of the simple steps to get started in arbitrage if someone is curious and wants to get started today.
Yeah, I think once you've decided kind of what market you wanna be in and what property looks good, pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to make the call. It's okay if you call and you mess up. You can just hang up and you'll never talk to that person again. That's okay, right? It takes a little bit of tenacity, but usually not too much, and you'll build your confidence pretty quickly. But remember that you're doing them as much of a favor as they are doing you. And then dive into furnishing. Remember, furnishing does not have to be overboard. You don't have to go crazy. It can be very simplistic. You can be like Kelly Bailey, who loves to go on Facebook Marketplace, or you can be like me and love to go to Target and Amazon. There's different ways to do it. Minoan is fantastic. Get yourself a good checklist and just start picking away at it. And then find yourself a really great cleaner. With arbitrage, you don't need a realtor, you don't need a lender, you don't need a handyman. Usually, the property will have its own maintenance team. You just need a really good cleaner, and you need someone to be boots on the ground. We have a property that's actually 2.5 hours away from my closest family member, and our boots on the ground is another one of our podcast guests who is just kind of the if everything goes wrong, Chris can go take something for us, right? So just have at least someone that you can get there if you absolutely need to, and then just give it a try. Like, it's a low risk thing, right? Like, you're not buying a property, you're just trying it out.
Mm-hmm. That was Chris Dickey. He's one of our episodes. He markets exclusively his midterm rentals with Furnished Finder. So, another great episode to check out. So, just as we wrap up this episode, just a reminder we create playlists on YouTube for any topic that you might want to hear more about. Arbitrage is one of those topics. So, just stay tuned to Furnish Finder marketing channels. We've got our email, we've got, social media, we've got our fantastic customer service team, we've got our help center on the website. So we are here to support you in your journey. Katie, Nate, thanks so much for sharing your story today of growing your arbitrage business with midterm rentals. And like I said, their properties are impeccable. So if you really want to see what a well-marketed property looks like on Furnish Finder, check the show notes, go click on their listings. You'll get lost and have fun just exploring their different marketing avenues. So until next time, thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.